So after this explode, how much was there frame damage done to the car? Did the car have to be rebuilt?
We totaled the car and came back and had a new car the next year, and was pretty successful. But we ran it the next year and was fairly successful. We won some stuff, but the year after that, we put a late model in.
Okay.
We put a 4.6 in it.
Oh, okay.
Did away with the old 392 stuff, and we should have done that earlier, but we didn't. We just, you sometimes drag racing was an awful lot of follow the leader stuff. Yeah. You did what you thought somebody else was doing, or they would tell you what you're doing, and you did an awful lot of that stuff.
Well, the 392, I mean, it had a great run. I mean,
my God, there was people, the Anderson brothers and some of those people out of Texas would go to the salvage yard and get an engine and change the camshaft and put a blower on it and run everything stock, pistons, rods, everything.
Wow.
I never actually saw that happen, but that was the legend, and I think it was true.
Well, and the thing about it is the 392, you could go to a junkyard back then and get one for $50.
$50, yeah, $50 for a
that's amazing,
competitive
isn't it?
engine, an engine that you could go compete with for $50.
Yeah,
and Lewis Boyd, who I again drove for, he did a lot of work. He did a lot of work and until his death, a lot of work for Torrance, Steve Torrance and Billy Torrance. In fact, I met Steve and Billy through Lewis and spent quite a bit of time with them. But I was down there one day and he was working on one of their engines. They had the competition eliminator deal. They ran that also as they had the fuel dragster, but they also had the class dragsters, whatever. I don't know what those things are. And Lewis said, this oil, we were talking, he said the oil system on this car costs more than our race car did in 1967.
Well, and that's the point right there. That's why you could get a group of 3 guys that had good jobs, put them together and go top fuel racing. You can't do that today.
Absolutely.
Well, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to tell you, then after that little episode, then I came back and bought and paid and traded out and whatever with Dumont and got the engine out of the dragster. And that was the basis for my first funny car. And
that's what I was just going to ask you. So when exactly did you make that switch from top fuel to funny car? What, 73?
74, I think.
74.
Yeah. And I bought Mike Burkhart, big Mike Burkhart, had bought Burkhart would buy investment things, and he bought a car and trailer from Mr. Ed, it was Mr. Ed car. Yep. And so he bought that car from Mr. Ed and it was just sitting down there, and Tharp rented a couple of times. They ran it a couple of times, and then Tharp was getting a new car. So somehow or other, I found out it was for sale. So I called Burkhart and I said, I want to buy the car. And he said, well, come get it. So I went down with an open trailer and bought the car and brought it back to Oklahoma City and put the engine in it. And I was ready to go. In fact, went to New Orleans. Burkhart said, I'll book you. And so he was the booking agent. So we went to New Orleans and it rained it out. So Burkhart said, you can't use that open trailer. And I said, well, that's all I got. And he said, come down and get the trailer that Mr. Ed type trailer that this belonged to this car, and I'll let you make payments on it. So I went and got that. I went and got that trailer, came back, and he said, while you're at it, take that damn Hilburn injector. And I'm not down on Hilburn, but he said, take that damn Hilburn injector off there and put an Enderley on it so somebody can help you. Somebody can help you with it if they understand what you're doing. So I came back in the meantime and put a Enderley injector on the car. And Mike Wagner, is that name familiar at all? Yeah. Mike Wagner bought a car from Cool.
Yeah.
Cool company car. And he went straight out and I think he outrun Garlitz at the Phoenix AHRE race or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Wagner was pretty sharp. And I still see his son occasionally. And so Wagner goes with me. And we take off and go to the AHRE Nationals in Green Valley. Well, we ended up winning it. First race we ever went to, we won it. Well, there's a springboard, the phone's ringing then, and somebody said, how in the world did you do that? And I said, we ran good, we got lucky, and we were in the right place at the right time, and we started getting bookings. And that's where the whole thing started.
So, we've already talked about the transition from A fuel dragster to AA dragster. Now, it's got to be a hell of a transition going from an engine behind you to an engine in front of you.
Yeah.
Although you said you drove altereds at one time.
Yeah, I did. I drove an altered wheelbase car. One of the old cars, one of them was a car belonged to Jerry Givens out of Oklahoma City. And the other one was a car called Big Money Dodge. And it was out of St. Louis. And I drove it. We went to Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and I drove that car, but very limited time. Went down there and ran against Seton Shaker. I remember that plain as day. Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and we run that Pete Seton. And anyway, run him a match race. So I had driven those things, but you know what? I took to the funny car just like a duck in water. It just fit so well. I just loved it. And it was a Don Long car. And then after that, after the Satellite, that was a Plymouth Satellite. And then when the Arrows came out, and I heard there was going to be an Arrow, I wanted an Arrow. And so I made arrangement for the chassis, and Perdome was getting both of the Arrow bodies. The first Arrow bodies, two of them were Perdome's. And Elmer at J&E Fiberglass called Perdome and said, hey, I need to borrow your spot in line here. This guy wants his body. And Perdome said, let him have it. So he let me have the second Arrow body that there was. And Perdome took the third one for his spare. And so we ended up having the next car that I had was an Arrow, and it was just, God, it was the greatest car. And I wish I had stayed with it, but just time marches on, and you think you want something different, and I might have still been running it.
So now you're in the funny cars. Are you more on the national scene now than you were before? Or are you still just
doing a lot of traveling up and down the highway, up and down the road, Wisconsin, Iowa, Arizona, Minnesota, back east, Florida, everywhere, all the time, going up and down the road. And
we've got another picture hanging right back here. It's behind my seat. You probably can't see it, but that was taken at Great Lakes Dragaway. And thank you for sending me these pictures, by the way, Larry. They're on the wall of fame now, and that's where they're staying. But picture, and I think that was that 1976 IHRA Summer Nationals? Is that what that was?
Probably. Yeah.
I was at that race. That was the beginning of you guys like you, Larry. The beginning of my love affair with drag racing started probably in about 1974. I was 8 years old, and that race right there, the Summer Nationals, IHRA Summer Nationals, I still remember it to this day because it was one of the coolest races I had ever been to up to that point. And I'm only like 8 or 9 years old, but I never forgot guys like you and Garlitz and people like that laying out in the grass in the pits, working on your cars, and you guys weren't afraid to come up and take your greasy hand and shake somebody's hand and stand there and talk to them.
We let you walk in and stick your finger down the piston hole, if you didn't get burned. In 1977, incidentally, I would tell you and anybody that ever runs on to a 1977 U.S. National and album, the picture deal of the U.S. Nationals 1977 is the best publication there ever was about drag racing. And I am a big Steve Ray's fan, but those guys, a family did that, and it's the most amazing book you'll ever see. If you get ever chance, everybody that's got one, Cruz and Beckman and everybody that's got one they'd kill for it. In fact, John Brook had one, and somebody stole it that worked for him. And he called him in the office, and it was about 20 people worked for him. He called him in the office. He said, that book means more than life to me. And he said, if that book isn't back in this office in the morning, you guys are all fired.
Oh, wow. Jeez. And the book you're talking about, by the way, was really an obscure book. It wasn't done by any known people at the time, was it?
No, it was an obscure book. The guy went broke doing it, but it was just the most amazing. It was, I've got 2 copies of it. One of them's real grainy. And I thought that I'd give that to somebody if they completely ran out. I'd love to have seen it go to print, another print, but um,
Was this, do you know, Larry, was it self-published or did some publication house own it?
I think he self-published it. He and his kids did all the legwork on it, took the pictures, talked to the people, did everything. And I'm pretty sure that they published that thing.
Wow, that's
And
probably why they went broke then.
Yeah, it did, and didn't sell very many of them, but it's become a cult classic sort of thing if you can find one.
Well, speaking of
go ahead.
Speaking of books, I saw Facebook post you holding Lou Hart's new book up. I'm actually, Reyes is going to try and hook me up with Lou Hart. I think we're going to try and get him to come on and talk about that book. But I haven't seen it yet. My understanding is it's an awesome book.
It is an awesome book. It covers the transition from the altered wheelbase cars, the FX type cars, all through the cars, and all of those things were just you didn't go from AFX to the blown funny cars in one day. That all was really a long transition, and he pretty well covers that whole thing.
Do you have any pictures in there of you?
Just in the back, because I didn't do anything I wasn't in the position to have swayed anything. In other words, I wasn't in the development deal. I had a friend that was in the development, a close friend of mine, Gene Snow. He was in the development end. And when something new come along, I could go pry that out of him. And I didn't have to pry too hard because he'd give it to me.
And you're right about Gene Snow. I remember many NHRA races where he'd show up with some innovative thing on his car.
He wasn't afraid to try stuff. We were like maybe Jackson, Mississippi or someplace like that at a points meet. And we had to run a points meet once in a while to run the world's finals. And so we couldn't get a hold of the track at all and couldn't do anything. I couldn't get on the track. He couldn't get out. He came over and he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do." He said, I don't know whether I would advise you to do it. And so we ended up doing a deal that was unheard of to me. We stacked all the weight we could on the clutch, and it should have gone up and smoked the tires, but it didn't have the steam to do it. Pulled it down so far that it wouldn't spin the tires. And it went through, and he was low ET and I was second, by those. And just to let you know, he wasn't afraid to try stuff, and he taught me all the things I know about. He was such a big proponent of springs, springs and the pressures and the pressure differentials and those things. That's pretty well where he even built an air powered car, that had air bottles in it instead of a supercharger. He just tried all kinds of things. He had the money to do it, and he had the want to do it.
Gene Snow, as I recall, Texas oil guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that would not like Gene because Gene had some unfair publicity along, and I'll leave there. But he was a grand guy and would help you anything you needed. He would help you with. I can't. Hoover, Snow, Gordon Minio, all those people all helped me. I would say the Hoover more Hoover that helped me was Tom, Dad, George was the driving force behind that Hoover deal.
Yeah.
And so, George was just a really great guy.
And as I recall, George, I remember watching NHRA national events going into what had to be the late 80s, maybe into the 90s. And George is all 85 years old, still out there out there tuning the car, turning the wrenches.
When Tom went off and had Pete, there was a guy that worked for, and then I meant to get deeper into that because of some of the people that worked for people were just such good guys that, it feels wrong just to say Tom Hoover's car. You should not mention George and the guy Pete that worked for him and those people, because they worked just as hard or harder than anybody else. But all those people were so instrumental. And after George left Tom, he and Ma went and put a car together, a field dragster. And if I'm not mistaken, the guy from Up in Cowboy. You can help me.
Oh, you're talking about Doc Holliday.
Doc Holliday.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine.
Yeah, I think Doc drove that car. I'm not
sure.
Oh,
yeah. Doc said he said that George he'd be at home, in the wintertime, and George would call him on the phone and say, "Hey, what are you doing? Come on out to California. We want you to run the car for us." So yeah, Doc had a long-standing relationship with the Hoovers.
You talk about things going around in big circles and coming back and finding out how small a world it is. When I was running the funny car, I would call Black's shop on Tuesday morning, and we would discuss all of those different things, and how many pounds you're doing on this, and what are you doing, how am I doing it, all those things, because I had 2 black engines in the car, and so they weren't complete engines, but they were partials. And the guy that I talked to all the time out there, the guy that I always talk to out there.
You're going to say Don Ewald?
That's what I was going to say.
That's what you were going to say.
I don't know why I just stumbled on that, but once in a while I'm glad that I haven't gotten hung up more than I have tonight, because as Sharon could tell you, that my memory is so bad about people.
And Don Ewald with Keith Black, he's now an Okie. He's officially an Okie. He's down there with you guys.
Lives in Oklahoma City. Yeah. And that's funny that those people just keep showing up. But
with Doc Holliday, I was just up at it. They do an annual startup party up there, and I went up there and ran into.
I saw your deal up there.
Jerry Newman, and actually Jerry Newman was unbelievable. He got his hands on. He actually had a copy of the Coolin Olson de Rafael Vasquez model, which I've been searching for forever, and he just gave it to me. I mean, unbelievable. But anyway, you're part of another. Ross Howard, I ran into Jerry Boulden now up there, and he's showing me all kinds of pictures of the whale, the Moby Dick. Then I end up with this picture hanging on my wall. So
when Ross bought the 73 Castronova car. Yeah. Phil and all the brothers Castronova. He bought that car out of the museum, and didn't have anybody to do the work on it, and end up calling me. So I end up putting all the engine stuff. Not the engine stuff were together, but I end up doing all of the injector work and all the spring setups and the pump setups and all that stuff. And so I end up starting to go here and there with him, and we've had such a grand time doing that stuff, running up and down the road like that, and so.
I know he's got the Moby Dick car now too. I don't know if that's a secret or not.
It probably is, but it's done now. So,
but it's not the Jerry Boulden now recreation of it. No. It's actually
Ezra Boggs' car. And
Ezra Boggs.
Ezra bought that car from Boulden now.
Yeah,
and bought the whole car. Bought the car, truck, trailer, every piece, all the spare, everything, just everything that Boulden now had, they bought. And that was one of the best funny cars I ever saw in my life. I mean, I'm saying that was really a good car from its inception to stepping out, winning races.
Yeah. And the beautiful vet body card. And Jerry's got a great story about the whole trip to California to Keith Black to have the car built and running. It's just a great story.
And showing up to pick the car up in a limousine or something. What I heard.
It's a great story. We're actually going to try and get Jerry on to have him tell that story.
Yeah, you ought to do that, because that'd be so good. I found out something this last week that I had no idea about, and this is on a serious note. I found out that AHRA was run by Jim Tys, his wife, and the son and his wife. Well, the son has died, Jim's dead, but Jim's wife, and I can't come with her name right this second. I wish I could. She's alive, and she lives in Paris, France, not Paris, Texas.
Really?
Yeah, and she's still here with us. And I'm going to write her, message her or something, and talk to her for a little while. If Jim.
Well, I had no idea that anyone in that group was even alive yet. I had no idea.
Yeah, that I didn't find that out till last week, and that Tyson's wife was still alive.
Well, here's the thing about drag racing that a lot of the new our younger viewers aren't going to know. Back then, it wasn't just the NHRA. You had the IHRA and you had the AHRA, and they were competing sanctioning bodies. And you guys used to race any event you could get into, right? AHRA, IHRA, NHRA.
Anything. And then some unsanctioned things up and down the East Coast. And I'm going to tell you an unsanctioned thing, which is when I was running for Gil Cohen, did you ever have any dealings with Gil or any of the Detroit Dragway, Motor City?
No, never did.
Several other plate tracks. Well, when you'd run for and Gil I always ran good for Gil, so he always liked me and paid me well, and he'd have me up there. I'd go up there 3 or 4 times a year and run Detroit and Motor City. And when you got paid up there, they would pay you cash, and they took you into a blockhouse, a concrete block, and there was a guy in there with an automatic weapon, not a semi-automatic weapon, an automatic weapon. And when you went into the inside of the blockhouse, that's where the money actually was. There was a separate blockhouse inside, and they would give you $3,000-$4,000 in a grocery sack. And you're walking through the pits in Detroit with a grocery sack full of money. And they would send a guard with you to get you in your car. And then they'd say, "Have you got a gun?" I say, "Yeah." And they lay it in the front seat and don't stop for anybody. Boy, we'd haul ass out of there.
It's stories like that just your modern sensibilities can't hardly believe that stuff.
No, I was a guy that worked for me. Bobby Millsap worked for me for a long time. My guy Larry Bray worked for me probably longer than anybody. But he would go off, he moved to Seattle there for a little while. And I had a guy named Bobby Millsap who worked for me, among others. And Bobby and I were someplace back east, and it was at night. And I don't know where it was. It was a match race thing or something. And car goes out. I don't remember, first, second round or whatever it was. Car goes out about 150 feet and goes whoop. And I knew right away what it was. It broke the pinion gear, because we would break the pinion gear occasionally. If you got a good tight track, you'd break the pinion gear. And I knew what it was. So I just turned around and they come and got me. We went back to the trailer and started, we were sitting there at the back of the trailer, and we were, I was changing clothes and we were getting ready to load the car. And a guy stepped around the edge of the trailer and said, "What happened?" And I said, "Broke the rear end." He said, "Huh." He stood there and nodded his head for a minute. And he said, "I want to see it." And I said, "What'd you say?" And he said, "I want to see it." And I said, "What do you mean you want to see it?" He said, "I want you to take it apart." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to take it apart here." And about that time, 2 more guys, well, it was dark at night, 2 more guys stepped around the edge of the trailer with their hands in their pockets. And he said, "We want to see it." And I said, "Sure thing." I said, "Sure thing. We're going to take it apart right here." So we were getting ready to go on to Union Grove or someplace the next day. So we had to take it apart anyway. So we snatched the body off. They helped us get the body off, took the rear end out, and I was really relieved to find that it did in fact break a pinion gear. And the guy said, I really apologize." He said, "But you should have won this race." And he said, "I lost my ass on you."
Oh, wow.
And so, those guys, US 30, they didn't pull cars to the starting line until the guy behind the grandstand told them all the money was down on match races. It was kind of a scary deal. You had to know what you're doing, where you were.
US 30, that's a story track. You talk about the match racing circuit, and I forget who was telling me stories about Ivo, and I forget who else would literally at the Holiday Inn there at US 30 would pull their engines out and put them on the bed at nighttime to work on them, so they were ready for the next day's race. The hostesses and whatever else, the cleaning maids in the hotel, were told not to associate with the drag racers. I mean, there's a lot of stories that come out of US 30.
There wasn't a trailer on the premises that at any one time didn't have 4 Holiday Inn towels in the trailer.
The best part of that story, though, that I heard was that the cleaning ladies were told, don't Don't go in the driver's rooms when they're in there.
No, don't. You know, the worst night I ever spent in my life anywhere. When I die and go to hell or wherever I go, it cannot be as bad as this night I spent. I spent the night next door in the motel to Cheryl Greer and his crazy group.
Oh my.
They were up screaming and hollering and throwing ice and running up and down the halls and everything all night. I thought, when does this group ever go to bed? I thought about that. I'd just step out and shoot all of them. And I thought, well, surely they'll miss them.
You know, speaking of that group, Tommy Ivo, you know, he's notorious for staying up till 6 o'clock in the morning and then sleeping all afternoon. You know, that guy used to do all his best work at nighttime.
Yeah, he slept with one of those sleeping things, those masks on. Tarzan would make fun of him. He had that sleeping mask on, which, by the way, I wear one of those now, so I don't try to make too much fun of anybody.
Well, there's a story, and I don't know if you were around for this. There's a story about Ivo, and I can't remember if it was Great Lakes Dragway or if it was US 30 or where it was, where in the middle of the night, he went out and pulled all the hoods off of everybody's tow trucks and switched everybody's hoods. So when they all got up in the morning, they all had different color hoods on their trucks.
Well, Tarzan probably was involved in that too. I'm sure that Tarzan was involved in that. One morning, somebody's beating on my door. We were in Dallas. Somebody's beating on my door, and it was Johnny White, the Houston Hustler, and he said, "Come look at this." Somebody had stole his headlights out of his truck. There was a module in those Chevrolet dualies. You know, you just took about six screws out, unplugged some wires, and you had the whole headlight thing. And so he had no grill and no headlights to go home. And so he had to go to the hardware store and buy some kind of lights that would fit in there, so he had to have lights to go home on. They stole his lights. You know, I'm going to tell you this story because it's really funny. And this buddy of mine has just passed. Jerry Givens just passed this past year, and was one of. I spoke at his service, and I said, you know, Jerry was one of the guys that you felt better for yourself having known him. Not anything they ever did. Just because you knew the guy, you probably thought it was improved your life. Jerry and I were at Odessa, and this was during the time we had I had a chaparral trailer, and he did, and we had dual cab, dual wheel Chevy trucks. Mine had a white insert in it, and his was solid silver. We had made a deal that we were going to meet at about 8:30 or 9 o'clock back in Odessa, or where I think we were in Odessa. And so we were going to meet back at so-and-so because we didn't have cell phones or anything at that time. We were going to meet, and we were going to dinner. Well, he left before me, and Jerry never would drive at about 55 or 60. He just wasn't going to. And I would only drive whatever the truck would run, you know, so we didn't have the trailer on. So I'm probably doing 90 when I pass him. And I passed him and switched back in, and we hadn't gone but about a block, and we met the highway patrol. And so they spun her around the road, and guess who they pulled over? It wasn't me, it was Jerry. And he is adamant. He is the nicest guy in the world, but he wasn't taking any crap. I didn't do it. It was that guy. Tell you who it was. You can go now. Then he argued till they took him to jail. So he don't show up for dinner. And we had no phone. I didn't know where he was staying. We got no phones. I don't know where he is. So the next morning he gave me this real kind of eagle eye, and I said, "Where were you at dinner?" He said, "That guy is in jail." Yeah, hauled his butt to jail, and he wasn't going for it. You know, I'm not going for it. Well, you know, you didn't do anything. He didn't do anything wrong. And to this day, I felt like I should have gone back down there and tried to explain our way out of that deal, but they probably wouldn't have listened.
You only hear that kind of story in drag racing. I'm sorry.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, this is kind of and you can understand, you of all people will understand this. Dumont and I were at St. Louis. And when I first started driving for Bobby, we were at St. Louis with the rear engine car. And it come nighttime, and I said, "Where are we staying?" And he said, "We don't have a room." And I said, "We don't have a room?" And he said, "No, there's plenty of rooms." Well, it turned out that the St. Louis Cardinals were playing a baseball game, and there was no rooms. You couldn't get a room. So he goes to the phone booth, and he's in the phone booth for about 30 minutes. He come back and I got us a room. I said, "Cool, where is it?" He said, "I don't know, but well, I'll show you when we get there." So we drive, do the direction. We end up staying at the Holiday Inn in East St. Louis. And if that wasn't an adventure, there never was an adventure. And I talked about the miserable night that I spent next door to that other group, but this was a scarier night. This was a scarier night than that. There was screaming and hollering and sirens and people running and hollering and shootings. And I thought, oh my God, will we live through the night with this? Dumont had one of those sawed-off 18-inch, the one that the police kept between the two seats for a while. You know, I don't think they still do, but they had that little short shotgun. He had one of those, and we brought it up there and laid it beside the bed and tried to get some sleep.
Well, so I love these stories. I could do this all day. I gotta ask you though. So you're running the funny car. I've seen the pictures. I know that you were on the national scene and you were running some of the national, NHRA national events. What are there any of those races in particular that come to mind? You were more successful? Any of the best races?
Yeah, probably the World Finals. And we haven't talked about Ontario Motor Speedway. That was just the greatest, one of the greatest tracks that never was. It was only there for a year or two, probably there. And then I ran good and was really happy about the manufacturers meet that we ran in Orange County.
I've seen pictures of that. I've seen pictures. Here's another one of those pieces of history of drag racing. The manufacturers meet that happened at OCIR. I mean, the number of funny cars that were there is just unbelievable. And everybody's seen those pictures of them lined up, the parade before the race. Unbelievable. We'd
pull up because I ran that when, like I said, I was keeping the car at Sid's shop. And so it was, I would keep the car and trailer and I would just fly out there. Sometimes I would drive the truck back and then drive back out there. But we had 64 cars. I changed that, 63 cars lined up kind of in diagonal parking, sort of whatever you call that, parallel. I know it wasn't parallel. I don't know what it was, but kind of a diagonal all the way down the track. And I heard this funny noise and I looked up and here is Mr. Showman Jungle doing a burnout on the return road.
I have never heard that one before. I've seen the pictures of you guys lined up on the track. We've all seen those pictures.
Yeah, but all the rest of us were doing what we're supposed to be doing, and Jungle and Pam are down on the return road doing burnouts.
What was it? Okay, so you bring up Ontario Motor Speedway, and you're right. It was only there for a few years, running the World Finals out there. What made that track so great?
Just the scope of everything. It was, it had a circle track and it had everything, and it had restrooms that you wasn't afraid to go in, but it was just, and I don't know that there was another one of that era that didn't make it either. A little before that was Dallas International.
Yeah.
The IMS, and it didn't make it either. I guess it just couldn't afford. I guess what happened was that there just wasn't enough money to pay the bills and be able to afford that kind of property, and that's one thing that's kept Billy Meyer. Billy and I go back a long ways too. And I'll tell you a Billy Meyer story in a second, because if he tunes this in, he has to know that I'm thinking about this. So I just think Billy got way out in the country, and he built that Ennis deal, and the rest of these were too close to town to survive because property values just get, as they do everywhere, just get completely out of reason with property values. And so you can't have a drag strip that runs 3 or 4 races a year and expect it to survive on the proceeds.
Well, Dallas International Raceway was state of the art at the time too. And I think part of it with the closing of that track, I think had to do with the whole Art Arfonts incident down there too. I think,
Well,
that,
yeah, that didn't help anything,
but I mean, that was a unbelievable facility at the time. And it's a shame that it went away.
well, yeah, and it was there, and then we kept hearing that it wasn't going to be back, and then it was gone, and Green Valley is much the same, but Green Valley now is all housing. It's a real upscale housing edition.
Green Valley is another, it's just another one of those legendary tracks in the middle south of the country. Everybody raced at Green Valley at one point or another.
Yeah, right. And yeah, everybody did it. There was always somebody. You'd always see somebody at Green Valley that you wouldn't expect to see there, because we thought at first, I think everybody thought at first that that Green Valley, maybe that the times were not real, but they're not real, that maybe they were too quick. But Bill, like I say, I knew Bill McClure real well, and he swore that they were. And the fact was, it was low down in a valley and had tons of trees. It's all the things that you want to get oxygen in the air. And that was one of the best runs I ever made in a funny car, is at Green Valley. And I actually believed all that, I didn't at first, but I grew to believe that.
Kind of like Lions, just that rare air to make things happen, right?
Yeah. Lions the same deal. And some of those others, Half Moon Bay, they ran good at Half Moon Bay. Nobody believed that, but that was right. You could throw a rock in the water from Half Moon Bay.
You raced it? Did you ever race at Lions?
Never. I had never. That was one of my downfall, that I never did, because one of the reasons was Lions was kind of noted being a fuel dragster operation, rather than a funny car. Their funny cars ran there. Yeah. But anytime I was out there, I would run at Orange County, or I'd run at Ontario, or maybe one of the others out there. But I never did run at Lions. Always wanted to. Didn't run a fuel dragster there. Didn't run a and I thought, okay, if you could ever do one thing, I'd like to just go make a pass at Lions.
Well, Lions was, I know the guys that are in Division 7 out there will tell you that Lions was the mecca of drag racing on the West Coast. And every one of these guys that I've talked to about that track, they all say that the legend of Lions has withstood the test of time. I mean, to this day, they all consider it one of the greatest tracks there's ever been.
I think it still would be. I think it still would be. It certainly, even though I didn't run there, I would certainly think that probably would fill the bill of the probably the greatest track ever. Because it was during that time. It was in the greatest era. And I'm sorry, NHRA, but man, when you got 16, 24 funny cars on a premises, each one of these cars does a half track smoky burnout. I'm talking smoky burnout. It's when it comes out the windows.
Yeah.
I don't care about it coming out the back of the car. When it starts coming out the windows, you paid for your burnout right there. And you back it up and do 2 or 3 dry hops, maybe once kept across the start line. By that time, the spectators are all peeing their pants, because they love it. They did. And now, NHRA, I'm really sorry to say this, and I'm not exactly sorry, because you should have seen it coming. Yeah. There isn't a human being in the world that can stand at the finish line and tell me 260 from 330. I don't care who they are.
Yeah.
You can't tell the difference, And,
well, the thing about it, and I try to avoid any criticism of the NHRA. You can imagine why, but one of the things my wife and I went to the U.S. Nationals the year of COVID. They were basically giving tickets away. So my wife and I said, hey, let's jump in the car and head to Indy. And we did. We were like the only people in the stands. There was 50 people there. And the thing about it was that I noticed about that race that made it seem so sterile was it happened so quick that it's uneventful. Everybody's hooked into the groove. There's no pedal fest going on like there used to be. There's no showmanship. There's nothing. It's basically just the same run over and over and over with a different name on the side of the car. Is exactly what it looked like to me.
It is sterile thunder. That's exactly what it is. You know, it's just so sterile, and they didn't mean to do that. You
I
know,
know they didn't.
it goes back, and I was on to NHRA, but it amounts to, what it amounts to is be careful what you wish for, because you might get it.
Yeah.
And that's what we wish for. We wish to go that fast. We wish to do those things. We wish for all that money. We wish for the sponsor money. We wish all that stuff. But now I'm sure that people would like to be back to watch two funny cars do burnouts.
Well, you know, and I actually asked Steve Gibbs directly about this point, and he said, and I thought his answer was extremely good. He said, you know, at the time, we thought we were doing the right thing. We thought we were making the right decisions.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did it, because we all thought that. We all wanted better this, and we all wanted more money. We all wanted things like that. We had a meeting one night at Corpus Christi, and there was, the track operator was there. Everybody was there, and it had rained a race out. And we had this big meeting, and it was not at night, but it was in the evening. And we'd gone to the Holiday Inn, and they rented a big room, and we were talking about what we wanted, and the track operators were talking about what they wanted. Well, this one track operator, God bless him, and I don't remember where he was from. He only had one leg, and he's leaned up against the wall, kind of standing with his leg propped against the wall. And somebody said, well, how much money do you guys want to win? And somebody said $2,000. But about that time, this guy's leg slid out from under him and fell on the floor. And it, honest to God, it really happened.
I guess that was your answer, wasn't it?
Yeah, we didn't even question after that, you know. I think that was the same race. I think that was the same race that somebody, I can't remember who it was. It's not that I can't come with the name. I can't remember who it was. It kind of cleared out, and the track operator said, you know, we could go back and have a race right now if we had the spectators back. And I don't remember who said that, but they said, I got both their phone numbers if you want to call them. I probably wasted all of your time that I need to waste, but we covered a lot of ground, except I want to tell you about my friends. Two friends.
Please do.
Billy Meyer and Gene Snow. Gene Snow, my buddy Gene Snow, when I would go to the races, he would show up, and I had a camshaft that he loved. And he would borrow this he'd come to the races with no camshaft in his car. And he would put this camshaft in his car and use it. And I said, just keep that, Gene, just keep that. And, you know, give it to me in a month or 2 months or something, or just keep it. I don't care. He said, oh, I want you to have it back. So he'd take that back every time that he was through using it, he'd bring that camshaft back to me and clean it up. It'd still be steaming hot, and he'd put it back in my spare part bin. Well, at the same time, Billy Meyer is borrowing a fuel pump from me. And every place I'd go, Billy Meyer's borrowing my fuel pump. And one day I was standing looking, I was doing my McEwen imitation. McEwen would stand in the trailer door with his fingers on the top of the door, leaning out, watching everybody work, because he didn't work. I was doing my McEwen imitation at the front door. So here they both came at the same time. And I said, what in the hell do you guys want? And they said, you know what we want, Brown. And I said, listen, I'm sick of this. And I was just giggling. I said, I am sick of this. You guys could buy and sell this whole operation, and I don't see any reason for you to come over and borrow my stuff. And Snow said, well, Brown, I'd really like to, but I'm just too damn tight. Oh my God. I recently ran into Mike Couch. Mike Couch is, he's a prize in itself.
Mike Couch is a good friend of mine. And, you know, most of the stories that I've heard that I cannot repeat on this show have come out of Mike Couch's mouth. Unbelievable. I get him mixed with, every once in a while in my mind, I get him mixed with Donnie Couch, and they're nowhere near the same, you know. I think Mike Couch said to me one time, don't ever accuse me of being related to Donnie Couch.
My friend Gene Beavers smoked Camel cigarettes, the LA hooker. He smoked Camels all the time, and he kept them in his shirt pocket rolled up. And we were standing talking one day, and I'd quit smoking by that time. And I said, Beaver, you're going to have to quit smoking. I said, if you don't quit smoking, you at least have to quit smoking those damn Camels, because they're going to kill you. And so he said, I'm not ever going to quit smoking. He said, I got nothing, that, and he was just going on and on. And I said, you got to quit smoking those Camels. And I'm ragging him anyway. He said, Brown, he said, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to smoke these Camels till I die. And I didn't see him for about 3 years, because he went to Australia and New Zealand and spent a lot of time over there and didn't come back, probably because the U.S. wouldn't let him back, but some of that had to do with something else. And when the first time I saw him, he reaches in his shirt pocket and comes out with a package of Territons. And I said, Beaver, you are the lightest SOB I've ever seen in my life. You told me that you were going to smoke those Camels till you died. And he raises his shirt up, and he is split from his neck all the way to his belly button, he said, by God, he said, I did.
Oh, wow. Did he race over there in New Zealand, Australia? Is that what he was doing down there?
I don't even remember who drove for him. He had different drivers. Bernstein drove for him for a while.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, Kenny drove for him for a while. I don't remember who was driving over there on that New Zealand. In fact, I had gone to the Port Authority and went to dinner with some people that run those tracks over there. And I was actually going to go over there. And boy, I am so thankful I didn't go, because I probably didn't have resources to stay long enough to realize anything and not come home.
I've heard stories about these cars that make the trip across the ocean, and the salt water and all that stuff, the salt atmosphere just tears those cars up. By the time they get there, they basically got to rework the entire car.
Everything. Well, they stick them in a container, and then they unload them, and it just went. And that brings up one of the last things. In about 1982, I was able to start seeing that if you were going to stay, you were going to have a major sponsor.
Yeah.
You were going to have more than 2 or 3 guys working for you. You were going to have 5 or 6 guys, and you were going to have a major sponsor. And I saw an easy way to leave, and so I sold part of the car to a guy named Bill Daly out of Kansas City. I think he's out of Kansas City. Joplin. He's out of Joplin, Missouri. I sold part of him. And so we ended up buying that Power Steel car, that Corvette that had the covered engine.
Denny Savage drove?
Denny Savage car. We ended up buying that. And
that is, by the way, that is one of my all-time favorite looking funny cars. I just love that car.
I love that car. I love the car. And it was a super car. Well, we were at Kansas City or something, and one of the guys, this was the deal. I didn't have control over all the people that were around it, and somebody didn't pull a pin out of parachute, and I went off of the dam in that car and bent the chassis in it. Went off the other end because parachutes didn't open. Bent the chassis, and you couldn't drive it. You couldn't drive it you just couldn't drive. It was undrivable. And so I left, and I guess they eventually fixed it, but I left and they paid me off, and I left, and my business was getting bigger at that time.
Yeah.
And so I decided that I was either going to have to go whole hog or quit, so, and that was about 1982 or 83. And I decided that it was just, I'd had 20 good years that I shouldn't probably have, maybe even had. I had 20 really good years, had a lot of fun, made so many friends. And I just thought that if I had it, Garlitz used to say that he couldn't quit while he was losing, because he'd be a quitter, and he couldn't quit while he was winning because he'd be stupid. So, you have to just pick a time that you can do that.